Nobody could have predicted that 6-year-old Corey Travis Micciolo was going to end up dead anytime soon. For most of his life, he lived with his emotionally drained mother, Breanna Niccolo, who kept his existence a secret from his father, Christopher Gregor. When Corey finally met his biological father for the first time in 5 years, things didn't exactly go as Corey expected. Corey was looking forward to a fun time with his father and a chance to bond with a man he barely knew, but instead, he was maltreated, forced to perform hefty tasks, and strained with exercises that his fragile body couldn't handle, all of which allegedly resulted in his death. While justice is yet to be served, Christopher Gregor denies having anything to do with little Corey's death, blaming his ex, Breanna Niccolo. But his past records and a pile of evidence against him say otherwise. Will he be convicted or not? This is the disturbing and twisted case of Christopher Gregor and what he did and may have done to his son. The birth of Corey Travis Micciolo was news to many except his father, Christopher Gregor. Corey was born on May 1, 2014 in New Brunswick, but lived in Monroe Township, Englishtown area, with his then 17-year-old mother, Breanna Niccolo, who was still a junior in high school. For reasons best known to Breanna, she made sure the biological father of cute, funny, and healthy-looking Corey never got to find out about his existence, at least not until she wanted him to. Christopher had since left the young teenager and moved on with his life, unaware that he had a child. It is still not clear when and how Breanna met Christopher, but from all indications, she was very young. She was just 17 years old and still a junior, whereas Christopher was 21 and done with high school. It's also not clear if the two dated for a long time, but it seems as though it wasn't a relationship that lasted long. Christopher left the relationship like he left others before Breanna, but this one was going to change his life forever. Breanna Micciolo, with the little help she could get from her parents, cared for Corey. She did the best a 17-year-old mom could do, but it didn't take long before her circumstances started taking a bad toll on her. She had to be both a mom and a dad, and it wasn't an easy task, especially for a teenager who still wanted to explore the world. To make it even worse, Breanna turned to drugs as a means of coping. She went full-on drugs as she struggled with depression and frustration. Her whole life was dematerializing right in front of her. Her studies, her personal life, her career, her family. Everything was looking like it was slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. And like losing her dream wasn't enough, she was stuck with a child she had to take 100% responsibility for. For the next couple of years, Breanna did it all on her own. She juggled Corey's school and well-being, but as the child grew bigger, so did his needs. She had needs too, and her involvement in drugs only made it worse. Drugs were expensive, and they meant that she had more bills to pay. She had to fend for Corey's needs, her basic needs, and now her drug addiction. She had no choice but to take a step toward survival. She decided to end the secret and to let Christopher take responsibility for his child. She no doubt needed help with child support, so she filled for one. No one knows why Breanna didn't call Christopher to tell him about his son before filing for child support, but it would later be said that she didn't do it because she knew the type of person Christopher was and she wanted to go through the law to ensure both commitment and safety. In 2018, when Corey Micciolo was just 4, Christopher Gregor received a court order for child support, but of course only after a paternity test was carried out. The news took Christopher by surprise, as he never thought that he had a child. He reluctantly decided to carry on with the procedure, and after the test, it was confirmed that he was indeed the biological father of Corey Travis Micciolo. Christopher was shocked at first, but also claimed to have accepted the role of being a father. He was mad at Breanna for keeping such huge news from him, but he initially seemed to be okay with being a dad, especially when he found out that Corey loved football. He claimed he had so much love for his son and would want nothing more than to be present in his life. Following a lengthy court process, Breanna and Christopher were granted joint custody. The father would eventually get to meet with his son the next year in 2019 when Corey was 5. This was supposed to be good news for both Corey and his newly reunited dad. It was supposed to be an intimate season to share memories and catch up on what they might have missed in each other's lives, but going by Christopher's past history, it's no surprise that it was the complete opposite. In fact, it turned out to be a total disaster. Growing up, Christopher was a spoiled child. He was born on May 1st, 1992 in New Jersey, where he attended Monroe Township High School. Coincidentally, he shared the same birth date as his son, Corey, who was also born on the 1st of May. In high school, Christopher was a star because of how athletic he was. He was an all-state defensive lineman who played for the school's 2009 group All-State Championship football team. After he graduated, he briefly attended Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. It was at the university that Christopher turned to petty crimes, or at least that's when the first one was recorded. In November 2010, Christopher was arrested for the first time for stealing from a woman's room in her dormitory. And when two male students tried to stop him, he used his fists and elbows to inflict injuries on them before he fled the dormitory. He was eventually arrested and later released on bail. When that wave passed, he tried to be law-abiding, or maybe he was just never caught doing anything wrong again for some time. In 2013, Christopher Gregor started working as a marketing intern in Florida before moving on to become a sales associate. Things were moving quite smoothly for Christopher, as in 2016 he earned a bachelor's degree in psychology at the University of Arizona, an online school formerly called Ashford University according to his LinkedIn profile. In June of 2017, Christopher started working as a math teacher in Baltimore, Maryland, but once again he turned to crime, even though he was doing quite well. Between August 2017 and April 2018, which is not up to a year, Christopher was charged with a number of offenses, including assault, robbery, and even destruction of public property. It was still in that same year, 2018, that he found out he was a father and somehow he seemed to have abandoned his criminal urges. But little did anyone know he was going to turn his anger onto his own son. 2019 came with two gifts from Christopher: a master's degree in secondary education and teaching from Johns Hopkins School of Education, and a chance to finally meet his son, Corey. Corey wasn't a difficult child. It was very easy to love him. He was funny and loved football, video games, the solar system, planets, and even the arts. However, Corey's reunion with his father, even with his great attributes, was markedly ugly from the start. Christopher and Breanna shared custody of Corey. Corey initially stayed with his mom, just like he had since birth, while his dad came for visits. Corey and his mother lived in Englishtown, while Christopher lived in New Jersey. Christopher hated the idea and it caused tension between the two parents. That same year, warning signs of trouble started showing. The kid always looked different whenever he returned from his father. One day, Corey returned home to his mother with busted lips, and when Breanna asked Christopher what happened, he said he accidentally kicked Corey while they were playing football. Breanna started getting worried. She feared Christopher was abusing Corey and reported him to New Jersey Child Protective Services. But after several reports, no one responded to her. The signs of maltreatment, however, didn't stop, yet she had no choice but to share custody of Corey. Things kept on getting worse, and it's unfortunate to now find out that her suspicions were actually true. One day, Corey came back home to his mom crying, saying he asked his dad about how his high school glory days were, and Christopher smacked the ball out of his hands. Breanna then sent text messages to Christopher about what she had just learned, and he replied confirming that he did smack the ball out of Corey's hands, but Corey never said anything. He also added that the exchange was just a joke and that the 6-year-old should get tougher. This killed Breanna. She didn't want her child close to Christopher. She was worried, but in her worries, she turned to the only thing she felt could help. She turned to drugs for the pain she felt, hoping the frustration would go away, and just like it was not enough that she had to deal with the torture of not knowing what could be happening to Corey during the brief period he spent with his father, the court granted Christopher full custody of Corey. This was mainly because Breanna abused drugs. She was unable to keep her mental health in check, so the court ruled that she posed a danger to Corey. The tension between Corey's parents only grew worse. Breanna hated herself for it, although she couldn't do anything about it other than keep reporting Christopher to Child Protective Services. It's still not clear why no one gave her a listening ear. Instead, she was rejected again and again. Christopher gained residential custody of Corey in March 2020 and moved into his parents' house in Monroe with Corey. However, Christopher and his son Corey ultimately relocated to live in Barnegat. On October 28, 2020, 7 months after Christopher got full custody of Corey, a family court order granted Breanna and Gregor joint custody. Breanna had completed a drug program and was working hard to get clean because she hated living without her son. Christopher received primary residential custody while Breanna was allotted parenting, meaning she had the visitation this time. It wasn't easy for her, but there was nothing she could do. Breanna never missed visiting Corey. She would always try to make up for lost time, taking him to parks and his favorite places. In March 2021, little Corey was months away from his 7th birthday on May 1, 2021. The 20th of March 2021 came with a lot of excitement for the child. Breanna visited Corey and they both went to Pennsylvania to see their family. Corey and Breanna had a good time, but they had to leave that day and be at Christopher's house by 3 or 4 p.m., and they were running late. There was traffic, so Breanna called Christopher to inform him of the cause of the delay, but Christopher was already upset. When Breanna got there, Christopher instructed her to leave Corey at his apartment complex gym, saying he would come pick him up from there. She did as she was asked and left, hoping to see her son again in a few days or a week according to their visitation plan. When Christopher got there, he walked into the gym with the 6-year-old son, and that was the start of a video that showed little of what poor Corey may have been enduring throughout the time he had been living with his father. A video that makes for a very difficult watch. A surveillance camera was in the gym, and it captured what went on. At first, Corey ran on the treadmill at normal speed while Christopher went lifting weights on the other side of the gym. It continued that way for a while until Christopher was seen working towards Corey. He got to the treadmill and increased the speed. Corey was only 6 years old, and his legs weren't strong enough for the normal speed, not to mention a higher one. Corey kept falling and trying to get up, and one time he fell so hard on the treadmill that it pushed him to the ground. The video then showed how his father, Christopher, went over, picked him up by his shirt, and forcefully placed him on the treadmill, pressing him down and even biting the little boy's head. After several minutes, Christopher took Corey out of the gym and to his apartment. On the 25th of March 2021, Corey went to school, and at school, his grade 1 teacher saw bruises on him and was alarmed. The next day, Corey failed to turn up at school. His father didn't bother to drop him off at school, so he remained home until his next visitation from his mom. April 1st, 2021 was another visitation day for Breanna. Corey was happy to see his mother again, and although Breanna was happy she was with her son, she couldn't overlook the bruises that were scattered all over Corey's body. At the sight of these bruises, she immediately made an emergency application to the court to regain full custody of her child. But unfortunately, just like the Child Protective Services, she was immediately rejected. She then quickly took Corey to a hospital where they examined him, but they didn't find anything wrong with Corey apart from the bruises. However, they suspected child abuse and asked Breanna to follow up and wait so they could take Corey to Jersey Shore Medical Center to confirm the case of child abuse, but Breanna took him away to yet another hospital, the Community Health Center. After examining him, just like at the first hospital, they didn't find anything wrong with Corey apart from the bruises, which made them also suspect child abuse. They recommended that Corey be taken to Jersey Shore Medical Center, and this time he was. After several examinations and tests, they told Breanna that Corey has sepsis and was at risk of pneumonia. They asked her to leave Corey there for bed rest and constant watch, but she didn't. She was meant to drop Corey back at his father's house, and she knew how furious he always got when she was even a minute late. Breanna knew how Christopher was feeling, but it was already too late. It was already 1 a.m. on April 2nd when they left the hospital, so she decided to take Corey to her own house. The next morning, Breanna fed Corey, changed his clothes, and went on to drop the little boy off at his father's house by 9 a.m. And by 9:03 a.m., Corey was already inside his father's residence. Breanna couldn't have guessed that she had just seen her son for the last time. According to his father, Christopher Gregor, Corey went in and headed to bed to take a nap but woke up later that afternoon acting different. He said Corey was slurring his words, stumbling, and complaining of stomach and body pain, as well as difficulty breathing. So he rushed him to Southern Ocean Medical Center by 3:48 p.m. A CT scan was administered and Corey immediately started having seizures. At that point, when medical professionals were in the emergency ward fighting to save Corey, Christopher was seen in surveillance footage exiting the room. He left Corey, who was then all alone when he was on a short coma. Corey eventually died by 5:03 p.m., all alone in the emergency ward, but not before he told one of the nurses that his father forced him to run on a treadmill because he was fat. When Christopher got to know of Corey's death, he seemed frustrated. Surveillance footage captured moments where some doctors and nurses tried comforting him. Unknown to them, he may have caused the death of his own son. Christopher immediately left the hospital and drove to Tennessee. An Ocean, New Jersey medical examiner performed an autopsy on Corey's body and found his cause of death to be blood-forced injuries, cardiac and liver contusion, inflammation, and sepsis. He also ruled Corey's manner of death to be undetermined, meaning they couldn't tell how the injuries were inflicted on Corey. With the testimony of the nurse, the police went to Christopher Gregor's house in search of him but didn't find him. Instead, they noticed the smell of cleaned or dried vomit in Corey's room. On April 3rd, the day after Corey's death, Breanna sent Christopher a text message around 6:03 p.m. saying the police were looking for him, but he didn't reply to that message. By 9:06 p.m., Christopher used his phone to search to see if his phone could be tracked in airplane mode, and then, a few moments later, he searched if his car could be tracked and if red marks could turn into bruises. Christopher then went on to send text messages to his parents telling them he wouldn't be around for a while and asking if they could take care of his dog. On April 4th at 9:58 a.m., Christopher searched with his phone for, if there was a murder determined from an autopsy, how long to file charges. And then at 10:21 a.m., he searched for, how long after an autopsy to file charges. And finally, at 12:17 p.m., he sent messages to women on Tinder telling them he was going to see his brother in Los Angeles while he was in Tennessee at the time. He stayed there for one night before returning to New Jersey, which was a very suspicious thing to do. On July 7th, Christopher was arrested and charged with endangering the welfare of a child in relation to the Treadmill incident. Despite how bad the Treadmill incident looked, they couldn't prove that Christopher was responsible for Corey's death, so he was released on bail. In September of 2021, Corey's case was reviewed by a forensic pathologist. The pathologist believed that 4 to 12 hours prior to Corey's death, he sustained blunt impact injuries to his chest and abdomen with a laceration of the heart, a left pulmonary contusion, and a laceration and contusion of the liver. On March 3, 2022, Corey's manner of death was ruled out to be a homicide, meaning death by another person. On March 9, 2022, Christopher Gregor was arrested again and charged with first-degree murder. The state claimed that he knowingly caused and inflicted injuries on Corey that led to his death. The state put together its own theory of what happened, and it was quite straightforward. They came to the conclusion that Christopher severely beat Corey on April 2, 2021, leading to such a sudden health challenge. Christopher was offered a 30-year prison plea bargain, which he refused and pleaded not guilty. After Christopher pleaded not guilty and turned down the plea offer, he was held in the Ocean County Jail waiting for his trial, this time without bail. On April 30, 2024, 3 years after Corey's death, Christopher Gregor's trial started. Christopher continued to plead innocent of the allegations against him, and when presented with the evidence, the defendant claimed that everything was not exactly as it seemed. While Breanna Niccolo took the opening stand, describing Corey, her experience, and even the way she begged for help from Child Protective Services, she showed evidence as she was represented by attorney Jamie Schron. Every piece of evidence she had pointed to Christopher as the murderer, and it seemed that way. When it was time for the defendant's side to give an opening statement, the defendant's attorney, Mario Gallucci, started off by acknowledging the fact that no child should die. He also said that no one would watch the video from the gym surveillance camera and still believed Christopher was innocent, but then he claimed that beyond what people see is a father trying to make his son better. He also defended that Christopher picked Corey up 6 times, each time he fell from the treadmill, and would always watch him from the other side of the gym. He went further to say Corey died of sepsis, and in the case of blaming someone, he claimed it should be Breanna Niccolo. His reasons for such a claim followed from recalling the incident and disobedience on Breanna's side when she was asked to leave Corey at the Jersey Shore Medical Center, but she left with him anyway. He also brought the result of the autopsy, showing that Corey suffered blunt impact injuries 4 to 12 hours prior to his death, which meant that he was severely maltreated from around 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. on April 2, 2021. With that, he reminded everyone that Corey was with his mother for the first 4 hours of that estimated time, which is more than enough to inflict any kind of hard labor or maltreatment on Corey. He rounded this up by explaining that Breanna hated Christopher and wanted to do anything to bring him down, and besides, she wasn't over her drug habit, which could have prompted her to inflict injuries on Corey. He claimed the drugs she used were the reason why she threw stones, bones, and even a dead fish into the house where Christopher's parents lived. Breanna, however, accepted that she regularly used methamphetamine years earlier before she got clean, but just before Corey's death, when she couldn't deal with the fear she had for Corey, she texted her boyfriend and asked him to get her some methamphetamine. She also agreed to throwing bones, rocks, and dead fish at the home where Christopher's parents lived. Lindsay Carnevale, one of the nurses who treated Corey that day, has also testified as the trial continues. Carnevale said that Gregor showed a lack of emotion when she first saw him at the hospital. She said that Gregor told the staff that the bruising on Corey's body was from riding his bike and playing football. He also told them that they were not to call Corey's mother, Breanna Micciolo. Carnevale revealed that Corey had multiple seizures when he arrived at the hospital, and things only got worse from there. His heart stopped, he had stopped breathing, so we initiated CPR. The doctor intubated, where he put a tube in his trachea and into his lungs, and ventilation is provided along with CPR, said Carnevale. According to her, Corey managed to mumble a few words to her at one point before having another seizure. Christopher Gregor is currently held without bail at the Ocean County Jail. He faces life in prison if convicted in what some are now calling the Treadmill abuse murder trial. Thanks for sticking with us till the end. Let us know what you think in the comments section. Also, like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. See you soon.